And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a Cincinnati Bengals fan podcast from a real, raw, unfiltered perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 23, the Week 10 recap, where the Cincinnati Bengals lost in excruciatingly heartbreaking, disappointingly awful fashion to the Houston Texans at home. And we're going to break it down and try to figure out what the F actually happened in this game. If you're brand new to this show, go back and check out episode 0, where I explain who I am, why I'm making this show. Basically, I'm a longtime Bengals fan, former college wide receiver, and I wanted to make my own podcast to enhance the Bengals fan experience without being beholden to any other master. What does that mean? That means not sponsored by anything, not affiliated with the Bengals organization. I'm just a Bengals fan. I want to talk Bengals football with you, the listener, so I hope you enjoy it. In our last episode, episode 22, we did a preview for this Week 10 matchup against the Houston Texans, and we talked about all the important things to watch. This was going to be the battle of the two former Ohio State quarterbacks, Joe Burrow and C.J. Stroud. Like Joe Burrow said, he went to school at Ohio State, he played football at LSU. C.J. Stroud, all the Buckeye fans in the area know all about his career, and he was making a return to the Buckeye State. And unfortunately, in this initial matchup, the rookie C.J. Stroud got the better of the veteran Joe Burrow. We also talked about the injury concerns for both teams going into this game, and we'll break down what happened with that. And we mentioned that Joe Burrow was 100% with the calf injury. That wasn't going to be a concern anymore going forward. We had seen the Joe Burrow that we had come to know and love in past years. He was making all kinds of spectacular plays, scrambling outside of the pocket, making plays with his feet, plays with his arm all over the place. So Joe Burrow's calf health wasn't going to be a concern. What was going to be a concern was C.J. Stroud having previously broken the rookie passing record for single yards in a game. He, right before this, threw for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns in the win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That, of course, got the Bengals' defense attention, but in this game, the response by the Bengals wasn't really up to par. In this episode, episode 23, we're going to go through the game, break it down. I'm going to give you my high-level overview thoughts of the game. We're going to go through all the interesting things that happened throughout the game. I want to not miss anything, not overlook anything. A lot of fans were overlooking this game. I felt like they were looking ahead to the next game, and that's exactly how you get trapped. I'm not saying that the Bengals got trapped in this game. Like I said, C.J. Stroud breaking the rookie record, that's got to get your attention. But going into this game, just on paper, the Houston Texans were not a powerhouse. Anybody expected to dominate the AFC, and a lot of people expected the Bengals to win this game. The Vegas line had the Bengals favored by 7 in this game. So losing this game at home is not good, obviously, but it's hard to know what to think after a game like this. You know, it started off looking good for the Bengals, and then they kind of fell asleep for most of the middle part of the game. The Texans dominated all the way up and down. Then it felt like the Bengals woke up towards the end of the second half, said, oh, wait, we got to start scoring some points or we're going to get blown out at home. So they finally woke up, got back into the game, and it looked like they were going to win somehow at the end. Then they ended up losing in completely disappointing, backbreaking fashion, and it really took the wind out of your sails at the end. You didn't know what to think. I've spent a couple days going over this, watching the film, trying to figure out what happened, because when you watch it on TV, it's hard to figure it out. So I went back and watched the wide angle, all 22 coaches angle to see what exactly happened. Still trying to figure it out, but what I can tell you is they lost. That's all that matters, is they lost this game, and you can't keep losing games. As Ted Karras said after they lost to the Titans, no matter what happens, you can't keep saying, this isn't who we are, this isn't us. They said after this game, this wasn't up to their standard, and that's for sure. The standard, the expectation was winning by 7, and they lost by 3. So that's 10 points below the standard expectation, well below what we had expected, but we got to figure out why. Why does this keep happening? But, you have to keep everything in perspective, and a lot of very wise people have brought up the point that the Bengals are 5-4 after 9 games. That's exactly the same record they had last year and the year before that. In both of those years, they went to the AFC Championship game. Very similar situation. The only difference is this year, the Bengals are in last place in the AFC North Division at 5-4. All the other teams have a better record. The Steelers and the Browns are 1 game ahead at 6-3. The Ravens are 7-3. Bengals have a lot of work to do. So it doesn't quite feel the same. Like in previous years, they were still in the hunt. They were maybe tied for the AFC North lead. So they were in terms of the playoff picture. And it doesn't matter at this point. It's still only halfway through the season. There's a lot of games left to play, a lot of football left to be played. There's nothing to say that the Bengals can't go on another spectacular run and win 7 or 8 games in a row here, but that's what they're going to have to do. They can't keep losing games. There's only so many games you can lose in a season before you're basically going to be eliminated. We can't freak out and, say, oh, we got to fire somebody just because they lost a game. They haven't lost that many games yet. Like the Buffalo Bills fans, we won't get into that yet, but Buffalo Bills fans are losing their minds right now and firing people that don't need to be fired yet and doing things that are insane. So nobody freak out. Don't panic. But at the same time, Bengals need to stop losing games or this season is going to be over before they know it. And losing this game against the Texans, if hopefully they don't, but if the Bengals don't make the playoffs and we go back and try to figure out why did they not make the playoffs? Losing this game that they should have and could have won is going to be one of the primary reasons why they don't make the playoffs. But the thing that's a little bit troubling is things aren't going to get that much easier for the Bengals the rest of the season. I mean, credit to the Bengals, they won 4 games in a row there, and they beat 2 tough opponents in the 49ers and the Bills, but they still have to go through the AFC North Division. They still have to go through the AFC South Division and play a lot of strong opponents, including the Minnesota Vikings, who are looking hot with Josh Dobbs, their new backup quarterback. Bengals are going to have to face Josh Dobbs again. Josh Dobbs is going to be looking for revenge. They just beat him when he was playing for the Cardinals, but the Vikings, who needed a quarterback after Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles tendon, all these old quarterbacks tearing these Achilles tendons, you got to watch out after you hit 35 in the NFL playing quarterback. But they picked up Josh Dobbs in basically a pick swap where they traded like a late round pick to acquire Josh Dobbs for the rest of the season. He came in off of like 5 days prep. He came in on Tuesday, had to go into the game in the first quarter and ended up winning the game for the Vikings. They've won 2 in a row with Josh Dobbs. And the Bengals are honestly going to sit there and tell me that they couldn't have like given up a 6th round pick to get Josh Dobbs to be the backup instead of Jake Browning. Are they kidding me? I know. And then like Zach Taylor is going to constantly say, well, there's no way at this point in the season we could get anybody who could come in and learn this complicated system, even though Josh Dobbs is literally a rocket scientist and came into Minnesota and Kevin O'Connell just coached him up and they won football games 2 in a row. That's amazing. How did Kevin O'Connell do that? I mean, unbelievable, but whatever. We don't need backup quarterbacks because obviously Joe Burrow is going to be amazing for the rest of the season. I just don't get it. Like, what are they doing? They're not making any moves. Didn't make any trades at the trade deadline. Didn't try to do anything to improve this team, and they think it's just all going to be good. Anyway, but yeah, I'm just trying to, process this game. It was so frustrating, confusing, because you're trying to figure out, okay, well, who do you blame? That's the thing. Like I said, you go through all the initial stages of processing a loss as a football fan. And first of all, people try to figure out, who do we blame? Who do we point the finger at? This is somebody's fault. Somebody didn't do their job. Who effed up, basically. I'm trying to think, like, who didn't make plays, basically. That's what it usually comes down to, is making plays and not making mistakes. Who made the most plays and avoided the big mistakes? I'm trying to think about, like, the offense. Did they make plays? Yeah, they made some plays. They also made a lot of mistakes. throughout the day that, were pretty detrimental in the game, but they put up 27 points on the game. And relatively speaking, on average, that's better than they've been doing every other game this season. Except for the Cardinals game, they haven't scored that many points in many other games, and that would have been enough points to at least tie or win all their other games. So on the one hand, you say, okay, 27 points, not that bad. They put up 380 yards of total offense, which is, pretty good. That's much better than their average where they were like in the low 200s before. So it's an improvement in some categories. But then if you look at the Texans, what they were able to do on offense, it's like the Bengals gave up almost 550 yards. They gave up 350 yards of passing and almost 200 yards of rushing, 188 yards of rushing. They gave up 150 yards just to Devin Singletary, the Texans running back. So then you're thinking, wow, like Bengals defense, they must have been absolutely terrible, not making any plays. And on some occasions that was true, but they did force 3 turnovers. CJ Stroud coming into this game had only committed 1 turnover in all of the previous 8 games. He only had 1 interception against 14 touchdown passes and had not lost any fumbles. Well, in this game, CJ Stroud lost 2 fumbles and threw an interception. So in that regard, the Bengals were able to do enough to keep them in the game, but they gave up 30 points, which is not enough points to win the game. So you got to say Bengals defense didn't do enough, or Bengals offense didn't score enough, whichever way you want to look at it. Bengals as a team didn't do enough to win the game. Can't necessarily say that the Bengals played poorly. It's just that they got beat by the Texans. Like Zach Taylor said, they got beat fair and square, which if you get beat fair and square at home when you're favored by 7, really leaves you scratching your head, wondering what the F happened in this game. Maybe the biggest cause of concern when the Bengals lost this game is not only were the Texans not a good team and one of the teams that you would consider should have been marked up as a win before this season started, like when the Bengals were playing against the Cardinals, the Texans, and maybe the Colts this year. All those 3 teams were horrible last year, had picks in the first 5 picks of the NFL draft last season. So you're thinking, okay, those teams were bad. Bengals are a dominant team. They should beat these teams no matter what. The fact that they lost to the Texans, and then when you consider the fact that just 2 games ago, the Texans lost to the Carolina Panthers. That was the Panthers' only win this season was over the Texans. So you can't really take a lot of solace and say, oh, well, we lost to a good team. It's like, wait a minute. This team just lost to the worst team in the NFL, and then they beat us. So can't even really say, well, that's a team that was on a hot streak and they were looking good. It's like they just lost to the worst team in the league. You can't be losing this game at home. I don't know. So that's why. And now, there's another game coming up right around the corner and people are like, oh, let's just on to the next one. Let's put this one out of our minds. Don't dwell on this one. Okay, yeah, we can't dwell on it, but we can't just overlook this and pretend like this game never even happened. I feel like a lot of people, a lot of fans might just try to, have total amnesia and pretend like this game didn't exist. I don't know what you're talking about. That's fine. You can live in denial for the rest of the season and act like we didn't just lose to the Texans, but it happened, and we're going to break it down. So getting into the game itself, like we said, it was on CBS with Kevin Harlan, Trent Green, and the lovely Melanie Collins. But Kevin Harlan was all pumped up. He said the fans were going crazy in the stands. It was a sellout crowd, another 66,500 sellout crowd packed into Paycor Stadium. No special event this time in terms of wearing any special colors. There's just, a lot of orange and white and black in the crowd mixed in. But it was a good-looking crowd. It was a sunny day out, not too cold. It was about mid-50s, so perfect weather for football, like a light wind, about 6 miles an hour, no precipitation, no clouds, anything like that. So it was a perfect day for football. As they always do, the Bengals did the ruler of the jungle pregame ceremony where they have somebody come up and do the Who Dey chant with the crowd. This week, they had former Bengals tight end Bob Trumpy. I think he was on the initial team in 1968. If not, he was definitely on 69, but one of the original Bengals and one of the original deep threats in terms of going deep and catching passes for long tight ends back in the 60s. And then Bob Trumpy went on to have a long career in broadcasting, especially with NBC Sports way back in the day, back in the 90s when NBC had the NFL on Sundays, like regular Sundays instead of Fox. And Bob Trumpy was on there all the time calling games. So that was cool to see Bob Trumpy be ruler of the jungle. Last game, I think I forgot to mention that the ruler of the jungle was actually two people. It was the special teams combo of punter Kevin Huber and long snapper Clark Harris. Both of those guys, I don't think Clark has officially retired yet. Kevin Huber has definitely officially retired, but both those guys are effectively retired from the Bengals. Longtime Bengals special teamers, so it's good to get their credit last week. But this week, it was all about the Texans. And the Texans won the coin toss, so the Bengals received the opening kickoff. Bengals offense took over first. Their first drive was productive and successful as it has been in most of their previous games. The Bengals actually scored touchdowns on their first two opening drives of the previous 3 games in a row, which is something that they hadn't done in a number of years, I think going back to almost 20 years. And even the 4th game before that, they scored a touchdown and a field goal on their first 2 possessions. In this 4-game winning streak, they scored on their first 2 possessions, getting out to an early lead. Obviously, Zach Taylor was like, we like to play from ahead, play with a lead. Like, no kidding. So that was a good sign in this first drive. The thing that was weird about this opening drive was it was like all Tanner Hudson for some reason. It was the Tanner Hudson showcase. I don't know if that's what they planned on doing. Like, that's what the script was. The first drive of the game you think is your scripted plays. Apparently, they had a script of a lot of Tanner Hudson. The thing that was weird was we barely saw any Tanner Hudson outside of the first drive. He had 5 catches on the first drive. They ran 10 plays, and 5 of them went to Tanner Hudson in the first drive. And then he only had 2 targets the rest of the game. But, it worked. I don't know why they didn't. Maybe we should just throw Tanner Hudson every play. Screw it. The thing you didn't like to see right off the bat was first play of the game, Joe Burrow getting hit. So it ended up being a roughing the passer penalty on Will Anderson. But the Bengals, for some reason, they decided to have Drew Sample block Will Anderson, the number 3 overall pick in the NFL draft last year. They had Drew Sample block him one-on-one on like a rollout pass. And Joe Burrow got absolutely annihilated when he tried to throw this pass. I don't know why. I mean, Drew Sample, he can block, for a couple seconds. But I don't know why they were like, okay, here's the plan. Drew Sample against their best defensive player. Let's go. Okay, whatever. It got the penalty. It kept the drive moving down the field. But you don't like to see Joe Burrow just getting hit in the face first play of the game. Not a good sign. But not only was this opening drive a lot of Tanner Hudson, but it was just a lot of passing in general, like the Bengals have done all season. They've been very pass heavy. This was 2 runs by Joe Mixon out of the 10-play drive, and then all the rest were Joe Burrow passes. They were mostly short passes, like I mentioned, to Tanner Hudson. Tanner Hudson actually threw 5 passes in a row to Tanner Hudson, and then 1 Joe Mixon run that got negative 2 yards stacked in the middle. But other than that, there was a stretch of plays that were just going Tanner Hudson, Tanner Hudson, Tanner Hudson every play. And, he was getting yards at first. He got 13 yards on his first catch, first down, obviously. That was on 3rd and 8. Then they got another 8-yard pass to Tanner Hudson. But they were just working all the way down the field, dink and dunk. Eventually, I think the Texans figured out, okay, number 87, we're going to have to guard him instead of Jamar Chase, number 1. They were doubling Jamar, as every team does every game. But now they're like, okay, we got to cover this Tanner Hudson guy. It was even surprising, though. This first drive, they come out, they're on the Texans' 38-yard line, and they have 4th and 3. So this time, Zach Taylor gets aggressive and goes for it. I like it, the decision by Zach Taylor. Instead of punting it away, and he doesn't go for the long field goal, the game is still tied up 0-0 at this point. He goes for it on 4th and 3. The thing that was weird is they threw a screen pass to Tanner Hudson like a wide receiver screen pass, had guys blocking for Tanner Hudson. That was amazing, but he ended up getting it barely, just barely. The Bengals get it to 3rd and 7 at the Texans' 32-yard line. Bengals go 5 wide. They spread them out. This is what Joe Burrow seems to like he did back in college at LSU. All wide, nobody in the backfield next to him. Just everybody spread out the offense, spread out the defense completely all across the field. So they go 5 wide, and he's got Trenton Irwin, number 16, the wide receiver, lined up on the far right side. Texans play a zone defense, cover 2, and Joe Burrow hits a perfect laser into the cover 2 hole in the zone, up the right sideline, hits Trenton Irwin right up the sideline for the touchdown, 32 yards, an absolute dime. Joe Burrow is going nuts, feeling himself, and he pulls back. He does like this archer move, like this archer celebration. He pulls back like he's pulling a bow and arrow, slinging it to the touchdown. People are going crazy in the stands. People are mass pandemonium. People in Paycor Stadium are losing their minds. They're playing the I Want to Bang on the Drum All Day song after they score the touchdown. It's in, okay, you're thinking, okay, here we go. Bengals, they're picking up right where they left off. They're scoring touchdowns their opening drive. And they put up a graphic that said the Bengals are 20-0 when they score first in the last, 3 seasons or something crazy like that. So you were like, okay, Bengals haven't lost. If they score first, they just score first. Things are looking good. And initially, that's how it went, even after the Texans got the ball on their second drive, too. Bengals defense ended up forcing a Texans punt. So it's like, great. Initially, Bengals went on the field on their first drive of the game, score a touchdown and go up 7-0. Then they come back and they force the Texans punt. Great. Could not have asked for a better start to the game. Then that's when things quickly went downhill. Bengals take over at their own 12-yard line for their second drive. They pick up a couple short first downs, not any long explosive plays. They pick up, 20 yards, but then the drive stalls out. They get an incomplete pass. They throw a dump-off pass to Travion Williams that gets 2 yards on 2nd and 10. And then basically they go back on 3rd and 8. Joe Burrow, it looks like he's going to get sacked. He manages to escape enough, but he only gets 1 yard. So it doesn't go as an official sack, but the pocket was collapsing all around him. He didn't have time to throw. He tried to make something happen, but he got tackled for basically functionally a sack that forces a Brad Robbins punt on 4th and 7. Brad Robbins gets off a booming 55-yard punt all the way down to the Texans' 7, gets returned for 11 to the Texans' 18-yard line. But the play-by-play announcer, Kevin Harlan for CBS, comments about how Brad Robbins got 5.0 on the hang time on the punt, 55 yards. That's a terrible Kevin Harlan impression, but Brad Robbins might have been I don't want to say MVP, but Brad Robbins had his best performance of the season by far, and maybe the best performer of all the Bengals players. Just on the day, Brad Robbins had 5 punts with an average of 51.8 per punt and a long of 56. So he had a 55-yarder, 56-yarder. Brad Robbins was booming the punts. Unfortunately, he had maybe a little bit too many punts. 5 punts, it's not a ton, but the Bengals did have quite a few punts in this game. We'll get to that, obviously. But overall, good day by Brad Robbins. He had some inside the 20, inside the 10. So it's looking like as Brad Robbins gets more comfortable with the NFL pro game, his results are getting better. That's good to see. Brad had kind of a tough start to his rookie season, but he's getting better. The Texans took over for their second drive. 3.5 minutes left to go in the first quarter. First play of the drive, they hit a 23-yard pass to Dalton Schultz, the tight end, where he was basically one-on-one with Cam Taylor-Britt on the left sideline. Kind of just ran a deep hook or a deep in, got separation from Cam Taylor-Britt, who didn't even make a play on the ball. Easy completion. And Dalton Schultz, when they needed to play, he didn't have that many catches in this game. He only had 4 catches, but he had 71 yards and a lot of key catches in big situations where they needed on 3rd and long. They went to Dalton Schultz a number of times, and he was able to pick up long receptions. Bengals didn't really have too much of an answer for him. They tried to use Cam Taylor-Britt They tried to use Dax Hill to guard him, maybe a little bit of Nick Scott in there, but not a lot of success guarding Dalton Schultz, the tight end for the Texans on this day. Texans kept driving it on their second drive. They completed a 15-yard pass to Robert Woods across the middle. The Texans had a 22-yard run by Devin Singletary off left tackle, where Texans' offensive line was just collapsing that left side. It was Cam Sample filling in for Sam Hubbard, and you don't really know how important Sam Hubbard is until he had to miss this game with an injury. The guys who stepped in Sam Hubbard's place, like Cam Sample, Joseph Osai, Miles Murphy, they were noticeably lacking in the run game support. They weren't setting that strong edge like Sam Hubbard does, and you kind of take that for granted. Maybe Sam Hubbard doesn't make that many tackles, but he's helping out in the run game to make the job easier for the linebackers and the defensive back to come up and make tackles. We didn't see a lot of Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson in this game making a lot of tackles. They were kind of had quiet games. They were getting blocked on a lot of plays, and the defensive backs like Cam Taylor-Britt, Nick Scott, Mike Hilton, they weren't making tackles when they had a chance to one-on-one against Devin Singletary. A lot of times we were seeing Devin Singletary one-on-one with like Cam Taylor-Britt, and Cam Taylor-Britt would just freeze and not even get a hand on Devin Singletary, let him go right past him. And that was what we were seeing all the way up and down the field most of the game. But in this game, the Bengals end up forcing a couple incomplete passes on C.J. Stroud. Then they get 3rd and 10 at the Bengals' 18-yard line. They throw a pass to Tank Dell. He completes it on the sidelines. Refs call it complete. Zach Taylor throws the challenge flag. He doesn't think it's complete. He thinks the receiver doesn't get both feet in bounds. The thing that's kind of interesting about this is Zach Taylor's first challenge of the entire season. This is the 9th game of the season, and he hasn't challenged anything once. I guess he thought the referees were just doing such a perfect job that he didn't want to challenge anything, didn't want to cause any kind of a ruckus. But hey, it's like all you lose is a timeout by challenging it. So I don't know why he hadn't used any challenges. The thing that was amazing about this was he, for some reason, decided to challenge this play out of all the plays. And this wasn't even a good challenge because he lost. And on video, you could clearly see the receiver had both feet inbounds and clearly caught the pass. I don't know what Zach Taylor was looking at, why he thought he needed to challenge this, because it was 3rd and 10. Even if it was incomplete, it didn't even matter. But in the end, in this situation, it didn't end up mattering. But it's just weird that it took that long for Zach Taylor to challenge anything. Like he was like, nope, can't risk it. Can't risk that timeout. Anyway, the next play, so they lost the challenge. The Bengals lost the challenge. The call stood, but they gained 9 yards. They didn't pick up a first down anyway. So the Texans had 4th and 1 at the Cincinnati 9-yard line. And instead of kicking the field goal, they were already down by the touchdown. They had it that close. They decided to risk it and go for it on 4th and 1. And that was kind of a surprise move. You weren't sure. Maybe they're going to try to draw them. Maybe the Texans would try to draw the Bengals off sides or something. But they actually did snap the ball, but they fumbled the snap. C.J. Stroud couldn't handle the snap on 4th and 1. Maybe, they just got a little bit excited about how they're going to block it. And who knows, it's just a little bit different. But that handoff exchange between the quarterback and center, something went wrong. Ball hit the turf. And I think it was DJ Reader or BJ Hill. One of the Bengals went in, fell on the football, scooped it up. Bengals take over at their own 8-yard line. So right when it looked like the Texans were driving, possibly going to get a touchdown to score the game or at least get a field goal, they screw up, turn the ball over to the Bengals. That was the end of the first quarter. The Bengals took over to start the second quarter, leading 7-0. Bengals' third drive started from their own 11-yard line. They started with a incomplete pass to Joe Mixon out of the left flat where the Texans linebacker had a bead on Joe Mixon immediately. They didn't fool the Texans at all. Joe Burrow threw the pass to Joe Mixon, and it was lucky he didn't get his head taken off by the linebacker. It was lucky that it was just incomplete, maybe not even intercepted. So that one, I don't know what, some of the play calling and the design and the creativity that we have seen in previous weeks wasn't quite there by the Bengals. It was strange that they seem to take a step backwards in this game and run Joe Burrow almost exclusively out of the shotgun again, like they had been in the previous weeks. And I don't know, they didn't say anything about Joe Burrow's calf. I didn't see any indication that he was injured. So it was weird. Almost every snap in the game, they played out of shotgun. The Bengals, I think they only went under center one time, and the results were really bad when they did go under center. But I don't know why they decided to go almost exclusively out of shotgun again, because they had success running it out of center. And we saw actually in this game itself, the Texans had a lot of success under center doing play action passes. The same thing the Bengals had done to the 49ers and the Bills. So I didn't get any explanation. I don't know why they decided to revert back to what wasn't working previously. But on 2nd and 10, Bengals offensive line collapses again. This time, Orlando Brown Jr., the left tackle, he's given enough pressure off the left edge. Joe Burrow's getting hit while he's throwing, so he basically has to just dump it off to Joe Mixon for basically no gain. We saw that a lot in this game. Joe Burrow having to get the ball out quick to the flat or get the ball out to the check down guy because he's getting hit, because the offensive line is collapsing, the pocket's collapsing all around him. They're coming at Joe Burrow from all directions, so he had to get the ball out of his hands earlier than he would have liked, maybe. But at the same time, the Bengals coaches have to maybe do something to mitigate that and say, okay, if we know that the pressure's coming in on Joe Burrow quick, we got to have some routes that can win and get open quick. It didn't look like guys that they want, like Jamar Chase or Tyler Boyd, those guys weren't open early enough to get the ball. They were dumping the ball off to, again, Travion Williams, Drew Sample, Mitch Wilcox, and I love Joe Mixon, but even Joe Mixon on his reception didn't do anything in this game. So the Bengals really need to figure out what are they going to do in response, because the offensive line isn't getting that much better. They've been bad for most of this season. Doesn't look like they're getting better. I mean, maybe they're a little bit better than they were last year and the year before that, but they're still not good. This offensive line still is not a dominant offensive line by any means. They can't run. They can't pass block. It's a struggle every week. Bengals had 3rd and 11. They pick up 8 yards on a quick slant to Jamar Chase out of the slot, but they're still 3 yards short of what they need for the first down. Jamar Chase got swung around. It looked like he almost took a hit to the head, but no flag on the play. There was a flag later in this game, but no flag. Nothing happened. The Bengals ended up having to punt again. It's another long punt, long hang time by Brad Robbins, the punter. But again, 2 punts in a row by the Bengals offense. And this was a 3 and out. The Texans take over for their 3rd drive, and whereas the first drive ended in a punt, second drive ended in a fumble, 3rd drive, Texans weren't messing around. They came out and scored a touchdown in 7 plays. They went 66 yards in 3 minutes, and they never got to a 3rd down a single time. It was just first down, second down, first down again, and just chunk after chunk. Bengals never really had any response. It was pretty easy for the Texans to just drive it down the field on the Bengals defense. And this is where the Texans offensive line started to kind of dominate the Bengals defensive line. Cam Sample came out of the game on the first play of this drive. He was in on the tackle on Devin Singletary, but maybe, I don't know if he hurt his shoulder or what happened. I think he came back into this game, but he was out. I think Miles Murphy and Joseph Osai came into the game on this drive. And that, I don't know if that was the reason, but the Texans just broke off like 13 yards, 17 yards, where they were trying to play like man-to-man coverage over the middle. Chidobe Awuzie couldn't keep up with Tank Dell. I mean, Tank Dell is fast, and Cheeto is usually able to keep up with some guys, but in this game, Cheeto was giving up some big pass plays. Then we saw Noah Brown catch a pass on 2nd and 6. He caught a 9-yard pass, and then Jermaine Pratt got a face mask where he basically ripped Noah Brown's helmet completely off. That gave the Texans an extra 15 yards. The first and goal, CJ Stroud threw a pass out to the right to Tank Dell, and it was one-on-one with Cheeto. Cheeto couldn't bring him down from the 6-yard line. It's tough to, make that open field tackle, but Nick Scott couldn't get over in time to give him any help. Cheeto couldn't make the tackle. That tied up the game 7-7. Bengals take over for their 4th drive with 10.5 minutes left to go in the second quarter. They pick up 3 yards on first down, 5 yards on second down, both by Joe Mixon on runs. Andre Iosivas was a little bit shaken up on the second down play. He came back into the game, but it's going to be questionable how Andrei Iosivas is able to perform going forward. He maybe have a knee injury, so that's going to be one thing to watch. He didn't really contribute too much in this game, and that was kind of disappointing. With T. Higgins out, we knew that Trenton Irwin was going to have to step up, which he already did. First drive of the game, Trenton Irwin had a touchdown, but we also were hoping that some of the other receivers, like Andrei Iosivas, could maybe step in also for T. But speaking of which, one of the other receivers who was stepping in was Tanner Hudson. The thing that was kind of weird was they had 3rd and 2 on this 4th drive, and they went with a pass to Tanner Hudson on the left sideline, where Tanner Hudson was in kind of like a slot formation, and he did a wheel route up the left sideline. It was a deep pass. It was, maybe you could say the ball kind of floated a little bit on Joe Burrow. It might have been a little bit further outside than he would have wanted, because Tanner Hudson, he caught it, but he was out of bounds. He couldn't keep both feet in bounds, and it was right along the sidelines where it was going to be a tough catch. And Tanner Hudson's a tall guy. He tried to stretch out as much as he could, but that's a tough play to ask your tight end, who they just signed off the practice squad, to make like a toe-tapping catch on 3rd down to keep the drive going. It's a lot of confidence. I like the confidence that they're showing in Tanner Hudson. But again, you're just scratching your head like right out of the gate, why is Tanner Hudson the featured receiver in this game? Jamar Chase, they had been listed as questionable throughout the week, but he warmed up before the game. He played in the game. And watching him on film after the fact, I'd say Jamar Chase was not 100% in this game, but if he played in the game, he had to be at least 85, if not 90%. But at least early in the game, they weren't throwing it to Jamar. Maybe, he was doubled up, wasn't open, whatever. But it was just weird that instead of Jamar Chase, they were featuring Tanner Hudson. Like I said, the first drive, it worked. This drive, going to Tanner Hudson, he's not Randy Moss. It didn't work. So they had to punt again. Brad Robbins gets off a 54-yard punt. Great punt by Brad Robbins. Good hang time on the punt by Brad Robbins. 54, and then Shedrick Jackson comes in to make the tackle. Shedrick Jackson, active in his first game of the season, making a special teams tackle at the Texans' 20-yard line. Shedrick was pumped up, so good to see number 12 out there making plays for the Bengals. What wasn't so good to see was after that hot start, now that was the 3rd punt in a row. Bengals had the touchdown on the first drive. Now they come up with 3 punts in a row, and the pain would continue throughout this game. But the Texans, when they got their first play of their 4th drive, they completed a play-action pass over the middle to Noah Brown, number 85, where he just kind of got lost in the shuffle. They did play-action, and nobody from the Bengals defensive line got any pressure on C.J. Stroud. That was kind of the issue throughout the days. Trey Hendrickson got a little pressure on C.J. Stroud a couple of times, especially later on in this drive. But for the most part, nobody else on the Bengals, like B.J. Hill, Cam Sample, Joseph Osai, Miles Murphy, DJ Reader, they weren't getting in and forcing C.J. Stroud to hurry his throws at all. So he had time to just sit back there and dice apart the Bengals zone. That's exactly what happened on this one. Cam Taylor-Britt tried to pass off the receiver to Dax Hill. Dax Hill was too deep. He couldn't get over in time. C.J. Stroud made a nice on-time pass to complete it for a 30-yard gain. Later in that same drive, C.J. Stroud completed a 20-yard pass on 3rd and 14 to Dalton Schultz. He was one-on-one with Dax Hill. Just maybe a little bit of push off at the top of the route, but, that's a good route if it doesn't get called. So Dalton Schultz got open, picks up the 20-yard pass. Dax Hill getting picked on a little bit by the former Ohio State quarterback going against Dax Hill, safety out of Michigan. But the Texans are looking good. They're driving it. They got it all the way down to the Bengals' 31-yard line, 3rd and 6. C.J. Stroud goes back to pass, but the ball gets knocked out of his hands, and it's up in the air, and it's questionable. It looked like it was maybe an incomplete pass and or a fumble. Mike Hilton from the Bengals falls on the ball on the field. They call it a fumble, and the Bengals recovered it. They go to official review because it's a turnover. All turnovers are reviewed. And on CBS, Gene Steratore comes in. He says he thinks it's an incomplete pass, and I kind of agree with him. When you look at it in slow motion, it's hard to say, but C.J. Stroud's hand was coming forward. Now, the ball was kind of slipping in his hand because he was getting hit by Logan Wilson and Trey Hendrickson at the same time, and he was trying to throw it, but his hand was coming forward with the ball, and it was kind of slipping. So it was kind of an in-between. I think because they called it a fumble on the field, they didn't have enough evidence to overturn it, maybe, but it was very close. If they had said incomplete pass, I don't think I would have necessarily argued with that call. I was saying to my friend at the time, looks like an incomplete pass. But luckily for the Bengals, they call it a fumble. So that stops the Texans' drive. They get the ball back. Again, unfortunately, Bengals go 3 and out and have to punt. Don't do anything with this second fumble. It's a gift for the Bengals to get it back twice, and they're punting again. Now, part of the reason the Bengals had to punt for this drive was Joe Burrow got sacked for a 6-yard loss on 2nd and 8. And whenever you take a long sack like that, it's going to kill the drive. Sheldon Rankins pretty much just blew up the right guard for the Bengals, number 65. Completely ran over the top of him, bull rushed him, just put him flat on his back, sacked Joe Burrow in about 2 seconds flat. And Sheldon Rankins actually had 3 sacks all the day. A bunch of pressures on Joe Burrow. I think the Texans had something like 9 quarterback hits. Sheldon Rankins had 4 of them. It was a long day for Alex Kappa, and that sack killed this drive. They tried to throw a pass on 3rd and 14 to Jamar Chase. He ran a curl route, but he only got 13 yards when they needed 14. I love Jamar Chase. He does a lot of great things, but when it's 3rd and 14, you got to go 15 yards. You can't stop the route and only get 13. That took them to 4th and 1 at their own 37-yard line. Now, as opposed to earlier in the game when they were on the other side, they were in the Texans' territory, they went for it on 4th and short. This time, they're in their own 37. Zach Taylor says, I don't think so. They end up punting it instead of going for it. They try to fake him out, but they ended up just, trying to get the offsides penalty. Texans don't fall for it. Bengals get the delay of game, end up punting it. On the punt, it's another great punt. Goes 56 by Brad Robbins. A lot of hang time. There's a hold by the Texans, but it's negated because Stanley Morgan gets an unnecessary roughness penalty, leading with the crown of his helmet on the tackle. It looked like it was almost a late hit because the guy was almost out of bounds, but it was illegal in that sense. But Stanley Morgan was leading with the helmet, which you can't do. And this is Stanley Morgan's 2nd game that he's been active, 2nd game with a penalty. If Stanley Morgan wants to continue being active for more games, he needs to cut it out with the penalties. But Texans take over with about 2.5 minutes left to go before halftime from their own 12-yard line. Basically, the 2 biggest plays on this drive were 2 long passes of 28 and 29 yards, both to Noah Brown, where the Bengals defense just did a terrible job of covering Noah Brown. Part of it was they were in zone, part of it was man. So you can't really say, some of the Bengals defenders after the game were trying to say, oh, well, they were running all these crossing routes, and as soon as we switched from zone to man, then that's when we stopped them. It's it didn't matter. First of all, you can't just play exclusively one defense or the other. That's like saying, oh, instead of running it, we should have passed, or vice versa. You have to keep the other team on their heels. You have to keep them guessing. You can't just do one thing. So you have to play a little bit of zone, a little bit of man, but you have to mix it up. But in this situation, the Bengals couldn't play man or zone. They were just letting Noah Brown get an open 20 yards, 25 yards down the field. And the other thing is they weren't getting any pressure on C.J. Stroud up front. I mean, it's easy to get open 20 and 25 yards down, or it's easier to get open 25 yards down the field if the defensive line for the Bengals aren't getting any pressure on the quarterback. C.J. Stroud was basically running around back there doing whatever he wanted. Nobody was in his face where he could just find the receivers downfield. And the receivers had so much time just to, get downfield, find the spot where nobody was. And the Bengals had a lot of players guarding air. I'm not the defensive coordinator. I don't want to tell defensive players how to play defense, but there were a lot of players standing around by themselves, not really in the vicinity of any receivers. I don't know who they thought they were guarding, but they were just covering a lot of open space. The grass was on lockdown, but Noah Brown was wide open all day. But other than those 2 long passes, the Texans really could not do anything. C.J. Stroud had a bunch of incomplete passes mixed in amongst those 2 long passes. The drive kind of stalled out. They had to settle for a field goal that put the Texans up 10-7 with 15 seconds left to go before the half. Bengals weren't able to do anything after this, besides Trenton Irwin getting blown up. For some reason, Travion Williams is normally the kick returner on kick returns, but they had Trenton Irwin back with 10 seconds left, and he misjudged it because he let the ball go over his head, but it didn't go into the end zone, so he had to return it. He should have called fair catch is what he should have done. That's the new rule. You can fair catch on the kickoff in the NFL and take it at the 20 or the 25, but the ball landed at the 1 yard line right outside, so he had to pick it up late and then try to return it real quick. He got blown up. Dare Agunbawale, who had to be the emergency kicker for the Texans last year, he was coming in pretty much full speed. It was a legal hit. There was no flag on the play, but Trent Irwin is good. Well, that's maybe the last time Trent Irwin returns a kick, because after that they had Travion Williams. But that did it for the first half. Bengals just took a knee, went into halftime down 10-7. Texans received the kickoff to start the second half. Now at halftime, you're getting your snacks, you're getting your drinks, you're doing whatever you're doing. But as a Bengals fan, you're sitting there, you're thinking, okay, we're down by 3 to the Texans at half. It's not the end of the world. Of course, there's plenty of time. You can come back. Lots of things can happen. But at the same time, before this game, if it was going to be 10-7 at halftime, you would expect the Bengals to be ahead by 3, not down by 3. And watching the first half, it's not like the Bengals missed a lot of opportunities. They just couldn't move the ball. After the first drive, there was a lot of punts. It was a lot of 3 and outs, negative plays, sacks. They couldn't do anything to move the ball, whereas the Texans were moving the ball up and down the field, but they had already turned the ball over twice on 2 fumbles by C.J. Stroud. That was keeping the Bengals in this game at all. They asked Zach Taylor, what does the team have to do in the second half to be successful? He said, just got to get in a rhythm, which, is another coach speak non-answer. It doesn't mean anything. What does it really mean to get in a rhythm? I guess it means have success on more than one play in a row. Have sustained success, which they have not been able to do in the first half whatsoever. Since the Texans are receiving the ball to start the second half, that means the Bengals defense is going to have to get a stop, get the ball back for this offense to get the lead. Unfortunately, that is not what happens at all. The Texans' first drive of the second half is totally clinical, methodical. They run the ball all the way down the field, 11 plays, 72 yards, but they ended up getting stopped short of a touchdown. Bengals defense prevents them from getting into the end zone. There is what looks like a touchdown on this play. Robert Woods, he catches the ball in the back of the end zone on a scramble play on 3rd and goal, but they say he stepped out of bounds at the back of the end zone. It gets reviewed. The call stands as called on the field. No touchdown. Texans have to settle for a short field goal, which they make, put them on top 13-7. The thing that was worrying about this drive for the Bengals defense was, again, Devin Singletary was running all over the Bengals defense without any resistance from the defensive line especially. Texans' offensive line was really just dominating up front, and not even the offensive linemen, but the receivers, the tight ends. They were all doing a good job of blocking the Bengals linebackers and linemen, so that Devin Singletary was having one-on-one with the Bengals defensive backs. Bengals defensive backs were struggling to make tackles all day. They were making Devin Singletary look like Barry Sanders out there. Nick Scott, especially on the first play of the second half, he came in off the right end, he had a clean shot at Devin Singletary. Singletary took one step, went right around Nick Scott. He didn't even get a hand on him. Nick Scott was crumpled over on his knees on all fours, just biting at dust. Came up with nothing, and that would happen a lot in this game. And it was crazy how Singletary, his long was only 22 yards. He had 150 yards on 30 carries, so an average of 5 yards per carry. He wasn't busting off a lot of long runs, but it was a lot of 7 yards, 8 yards, and it would be 5 yards before he would even get touched on a lot of runs. And for the Texans, they'll take that all day. You're going to give them 7 yards on 1st and 10, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3. That makes it a lot easier to move the ball down the field, which they did all day. But I neglected so far to mention how good CJ Stroud is looking. He's looking calm, confident. Some of the passes that he's throwing, there was one of the passes in their first drive. It was just like a fastball, 100 miles an hour, right into the catcher's mitt. A laser, a special throw by CJ Stroud. So he was showing off some impressive throws all the way, and touch too, not just like speed. He had a lot of mustard on a lot of throws, you would say, like especially zipping it past linebackers' heads. It looked like it had like, a smoke trail coming off the back of some of his throws. He was putting it past Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. There was a couple that got tipped, but for the most part, the Bengals defense was not able to tip many of CJ Stroud's passes. And he did a good job of putting air under it when he needed to, getting it over the defenders, dropping it in the bucket. And for a rookie, CJ Stroud is really showing a lot of poise under pressure. That's the thing that really sets him apart from somebody like Zach Wilson, the quarterback for the Jets. When Zach Wilson, even now in his third year in the league, if he gets under pressure, he starts panicking. You see him get flustered. He's just running around, throwing the ball all over the place, like in the middle of the field, like just making horrible decisions with the football. CJ Stroud, total opposite. He's just totally cool, calm, and collected back there, finds the open receiver eventually, and the Bengals are not putting any pressure on him. That's the thing that's kind of disappointing, is all these guys who are supposed to be our pass rushing, high first round draft pick, Myles Murphy. I know he's a young guy. He's the youngest guy on the team. He's not expected to contribute that much, but we weren't getting any pressure outside of Trey Hendrickson. Like, where were all the rest of these guys? And especially the thing that we were missing on this drive was no Josh Tupou. I know DJ Reader is who we think of as being the primary nose tackle for the Bengals, but he can't play the entire game 100% of the snaps. So they had to bring in some backups. Zach Carter, number 95, and number 97, Jay Tufele, were some of the backup defensive tackles. And these guys were just getting demolished in the run game. They weren't getting any pressure in the passing game. This is really concerning because we're paying the defensive line a lot of money. The starters, the core four, as Coach Lou Anarumo likes to call them. Hubbard was out of this game, so there were only down to 3 of the core 4. But Hendrickson, Hill, Reader, those guys played a lot of snaps in this game, but they can't play. I mean, they're 300-pound guys. They can't play every snap of the game. They need some of the backups to contribute. And this is where, if we think back to the preseason, Bengals were 0-2-1. They lost 2, had 1 tie in the preseason. And it's a reason for that. It's not like, the Bengals were just holding back all their good plays and just keeping it vanilla and losing on purpose. Those backup players are bad. And when they have to play in the game, the results tend to be bad. That's what we're seeing. When some of these backup defensive linemen are getting into the game, the results are not good. The Texans ran all over the backups for the Bengals defensive line. And we're going to have to figure, Coach Lou, he can do a lot of things, but I don't know what he can do about a guy who's getting blown off the ball 3 yards, and like Jay Tufele was getting one-on-one stuffed by the center. And it's the Texans' 4th string center. It's not even like a good center. It's their backup to the backup center, and he was just handling Jay Tufele no problem by himself. That's not good. But then to make matters worse, after the Texans get the field goal, they go up 13-7. They have a 6-point lead. Okay, not the end of the world because it's still a 1-score game. If the Bengals can get a touchdown, they can still take the lead right here. But they take over at their own 25 after the touchback on the kickoff. Bengals know they have some work to do. They take over, first play, 1st and 10. It's a 1-yard pass to Tyler Boyd. It was kind of a quick option route. Tyler Boyd just could not get any separation from the linebacker. The linebacker wasn't worried about Tyler Boyd going deep because Tyler Boyd's kind of a little bit slower than he was, and he was never fast. So nobody's scared of Tyler Boyd's speed. The linebacker is just kind of stuck on Tyler Boyd like glue. Stops him for 1 yard. I kind of am questioning the design of that play. If it was only supposed to go for a 1-yard pass, like, did they think Tyler Boyd was going to get away and break a tackle? Sometimes I wonder, like, the route to Jamar Chase in the first half where it was 3rd and 11. Jamar Chase probably caught it 5 yards down the field. Did they expect Jamar Chase to break a bunch of tackles and get the extra 6 yards? I don't know what the coaches are expecting the players to do, or maybe the players just aren't executing the plays as they're called. But either way, the next play is even worse because it's a perfect pass by Joe Burrow across the middle. Tyler Boyd's wide open, right through his hands. A horrible drop by Tyler Boyd, one we always expect him to make. And he had a couple years ago, that Super Bowl season, he went through the entire regular season without a drop. He had a couple bad drops in this game, this being the first of them. This kind of killed the drive because that brought up 3rd and 9. Right after that, it's 3rd and long. Joe Burrow gets sacked for 12 yards and fumbles on the play. Luckily, Orlando Brown jumps on the fumble, so it's not recovered deep in Bengals territory by the Texans. But still, they have 4th and 22. They've got a punt after that. This was an ugly sack. This was one where, again, Alex Kappa, number 65, the right guard, gets just completely bowled over, bull rushed by Sheldon Rankins up the middle. It looked like maybe he got tripped up with the center, Ted Karras, number 64, because both of them looked like they just fell over flat on their back. The whole pocket in front of Joe Burrow completely collapsed. It was just a jailbreak at Joe Burrow. Let's all sack him together at once. After that sack, takes him back an additional 12 yards. At that point in the game, the Texans' offense had 3 times as many yards as the Bengals, because after the Texans' first drive of the second half, they had about 340 yards of total offense. Bengals had less than 110 yards of total offense. So the Texans are tripling up the Bengals on offense. It's lucky that the Bengals were only down by 6 at this point, and it's because of the turnovers. The Bengals had not made a lot of critical turnovers yet. They didn't make the horrible killer mistake in the game, so they're still in it, but they really need to start picking it up. Unfortunately, that's not what happens on the next drive. After the Brad Robbins punt, not quite as good a punt on this one. This one only goes for 46 yards. It's still a fair catch, but not quite the booming punts we had been seeing from Brad Robbins. The first play, CJ Stroud throws it deep to Tank Dell, and the rookie DJ Turner gets called for defensive pass interference. DJ Turner was beat deep, you would say. Tank Dell had a step behind, but DJ Turner's got the makeup speed. But what he doesn't have yet at this point in his career is maybe the awareness to not panic and to find the football and try to look back in the air, because he just basically ran into Tank Dell. Tank Dell, the ball was a little bit underthrown, so he had to stop and come back, slow up. When he slowed up, DJ Turner just ran into him, didn't look back for the football. Obvious defensive pass interference, can't do that. So when he gets a little bit more experience, he's going to know you got to turn your head, look back, try to swat at the air, and maybe if you get lucky, you'll bat the ball away, but you can't just run into the defender. That's going to be a big pass interference penalty. That gave him 42 yards right off the bat. 2 plays later, Devin Singletary ran it into the end zone for another touchdown after the extra point. That put the Texans up 20-7. Bengals take over at their 25-yard line with about 7 minutes left to go in the third quarter. We see Joe Burrow scramble for 17 yards. He does a sweet pump fake where he looks like he's going deep, and again, there's pressure on him in the pocket. It's breaking down, but this time he's able to step up, gets away, gets the first down. Next play, he throws a similar pass, crossing route to Tyler Boyd over the middle. This time, instead of dropping it, Tyler Boyd catches it for the 14-yard gain, another first down. So the Bengals are finally making a little bit of progress. Next play, we see the best run of the day by Joe Mixon off left tackle. He breaks the initial tackle at the line of scrimmage, and then he's just busting through guys like they're paper mache nothing. Like he's picking up yards after contact, something we haven't seen out of Joe Mixon a lot, to be honest. He picks up 15 yards and breaks at least 3 tackles on this play. I saw even the Texans players on the sideline were kind of looking at Joe Mixon like he was kind of tough on that play. So good, tough running by Joe Mixon. He was pumped up on that play. Unfortunately, on 1st and 10, right after they got a holding penalty, questionable. It looked like a light grab by Jonah Williams. Joe Burrow was rolling out to the right side, trying to make something happen. They call the holding penalty, moving back to 1st and 20. They pick up 15 of the 20 yards back on 2 pass plays to Tanner Hudson and Tyler Boyd. But on 3rd and 5, Joe Burrow gets sacked by Jonathan Grenard for an 8-yard loss. It's not Sheldon Rankins for a change, I guess, but the Bengals offensive line is just really not able to give Joe Burrow the time. He's not able to get away. He's not, immobile like he has been, but the pressure is just getting to him so fast that Joe Burrow doesn't have any chance to get away and make anything happen. Luckily, the Bengals have Evan McPherson. He's able to make the 50-yard field goal on 4th and 13. That gets the score back to 20-10 Bengals, only down by 10 with 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter. But you're thinking they really have a lot of ground to make up. And at this point in the game, we've only seen Jamar Chase targeted maybe 2 or 3 times the whole time. He's been out there, but seems like mostly a decoy. And I know the teams are double teaming him and putting a lot of attention on Jamar Chase, but still, he's not getting the ball, and it's got to be by design, because we know the Bengals coaches are talented enough. If they wanted to get Jamar Chase the ball, they could figure out ways to do it. The fact that they're not giving him the ball, that kind of implies that they're intentionally limiting his workload, trying to take it a little bit more easy. But if they want to win the game, somebody's got to make a play here, and we can't be relying on Tanner Hudson and Drew Sample to make the plays if Jamar Chase isn't able to go. Now, the Bengals defense actually does their job on this drive. They force the Texans into a 3-and-out punt. Bengals hold Devin Singletary to a 1-yard gain on 1st and 10, which is quite unusual in this game. He had been picking up 5 yards on 1st and 10 at least. Texans get off kind of a shorter punt. It only goes to the Bengals' 27-yard line. Bengals take over with 1:30 left to go in the third quarter, down 20-10. They're able to get a defensive holding penalty on the Texans to get another first down. Then on 2nd and 12, Joe Burrow, he's scrambling around again. He's under pressure as he has been all day. He rolls out to his left. And then this is where we see vintage Joe Burrow rolls to his left, cocks his shoulders back to the right, throws a laser 50 yards down the field to Jamar Chase. He sees his quarterback, Joe Burrow, is rolling. He goes deep. Perfect chemistry between the quarterback and the receiver. 64-yard touchdown. Nobody is able to get a hand on Jamar after he catches it. He walks into the end zone. This, after the extra point, puts the Bengals back within 3. Plenty of time left. That drive only lasted 3 plays, 1.5 minutes off the clock, and 73 yards. So it's 20-17, still with the entire fourth quarter left to go. They were still in it. Not all hope was lost. When it was 20-7, they were down by 13. Things were looking grim. My friend Laura texted me. She was a little bit worried. I said, hey, there's plenty of time left. Don't worry about it. We're all good. We started coming back. I said, see, plenty of time. And then the Texans, right after that, they opened up the fourth quarter, drove it down on the Bengals, scored a touchdown. Went back to 27-17. But the Texans drive went 6 plays, 75 yards. I guess the only disadvantage for the Texans was they scored too quick. It only took them 2.5 minutes to score a touchdown on the Bengals defense. The biggest play on this drive was another deep pass to Noah Brown, number 85 for the Texans. He just keeps finding soft spots in the Bengals zone. Nobody's covering him. CJ Stroud's running back around doing whatever he wants. The Texans also hit another end around to the receiver. Xavier Hutchinson picked up 17 yards. Devin Singletary, of course, picked up like 16 yards on 2 carries, just running off tackle. Nobody was touching him for 5 yards at least. And then he was, getting tackled and carrying guys for another 3 yards after that. So he's picking up yards. For some reason, on 1st and goal, the Bengals don't have any defensive players spying on CJ Stroud. They go man-to-man coverage across the board. Didn't look like they had a blitz, but they just had like linebackers kind of floating out in space. I don't know what Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt assignment was exactly, but neither one of them looked like they had eyes on CJ Stroud. So CJ Stroud just dropped back, saw nobody was looking at him, and pretty much just walked right into the end zone. Nobody touched him. He ran in, started doing the OH celebration, put his team up on top 27-17. Good job by CJ Stroud. I know there's a lot of Buckeyes fans who are still in the Cincinnati area, so it was good to see CJ Stroud have a good performance, but it was a little bit less good since it was against the Bengals on this particular day. Maybe it could have been against the Browns, but it's okay. There's still plenty of time left. There's almost 13 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, only down by 10, so they can still come back, but it's a long road to go. Bengals take over. They start moving it. They start picking up some first downs. They throw a 19-yard pass to Tyler Boyd on 3rd and 6. It's a good route, good throw. 1st and 10, they throw another one of these Drew Sample designed, it's not really a screen pass, like it's a delayed release where they're anticipating, they're like, okay, we're going to take the Texans' aggressiveness and use it against them and let them come after us, and then throw it to Drew Sample out of the backfield. He picked up 9 yards, but that's about as good as you're going to get out of Drew Sample. Next pass, it seems like a miscommunication with Andrei Iosivas. It's the only pass that went Andrei Iosivas' way in the entire game, and he ran like a 15-yard stop route where Joe Burrow thought he was going to go deep. Miscommunication, it's not good. You got to be on the same page with your quarterback or else he's not going to throw you the ball anymore. So Iosivas needs to figure out what Joe Burrow wants him to do on that play. Obviously, he wants him to go deep. Just use your athleticism, go deep for it, go up and get it. In fairness to Iosivas, I would say that he didn't end up beating the cornerback over the top. Like the cornerback was still in front of him running down the field. So it's not like Iosivas had a good position to be able to go deep. Maybe it would have been the better decision to stop the route. But if Joe Burrow wants you to go deep, you got to go deep. You're always going to be wrong if you're the receiver. 3rd and 1, Joe Mixon picks up the first. We see some more strong running where it looks like he's stopped, but then he keeps pushing the pile forward, picks up 9 yards. They get the ball to the 35-yard line. They're driving. Looks like Bengals are making some progress, but then Joe Burrow tries to go up the seam to Drew Sample, up the right seam, and it's a high pass, goes over Drew Sample's head. He doesn't even get a hand on it. This pass, it was uncatchable for Drew Sample. Maybe if he were Wemby, this like 7'6" guy in the NBA, maybe he could have gotten a hand on this pass, but a normal human being could not catch this pass. Bad throw by Joe Burrow. I'm not sure why he decided to make that kind of a risky throw. It was over the linebackers in front of the safety, or he was trying to fit it into that hole in the zone over the linebacker in front of the safety, but it got away from him, and Drew Sample probably would have got blown up even if he had caught that pass. So the fact that Joe Burrow threw this interception may have inadvertently saved Drew Sample's life, but unfortunately it gave the ball back to the Texans, and that was a punch to the gut. Down by 10, throwing an interception in the fourth quarter. Not what we expect from Joe Burrow. Usually has more poise and composure than to make a mistake like that. After the interception, Texans take over with 9.5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. They get 14 yards from Devin Singletary on 1st and 10. They pick up another first down on C.J. Stroud's pass to Tank Dell on the right side, but then the Bengals defense is able to stop the Texans and force a punt. Texans don't convert the interception into any points, but they do pick up a couple first downs, which means that they run almost 4 minutes off the clock, just burn more time off the clock, and they've got a 10-point lead. Really, with the 10-point lead, it's a 2-score game. They really just want to shorten the game up at this point. It's a fair catch by Trenton Irwin on the punt at the Bengals' 8-yard line. Bengals take over at their own 8 with 5 minutes, 50 seconds left to go in the fourth quarter, down by 10, 27-17. First play, Joe Burrow completes a pass to the deep right where Jamar Chase kind of ran a corner route to the hole in the cover 2 zone, hit it on the right sideline for a 23-yard pickup. Couple incomplete passes, one deep down the middle to Trenton Irwin that probably could have and should have been intercepted by the Texans safety. It was a dangerous pass by Joe Burrow. I'm not sure why it was another one where it kind of like the Drew Sample pass that got intercepted right before this. Risky pass, probably could have been intercepted. Joe Burrow's taking a lot of chances. Even though you're down by 10, you don't want to just put the ball into harm's way on 1st and 10. That's the thing is, the Drew Sample pass was 1st and 10. This was a 1st and 10 that was almost interception. So weird risk taking by Joe Burrow when it's 1st and 10. A couple plays later, they complete the pass over the middle to Trenton Irwin on 3rd and 10 for a 22-yard pickup. So they keep the drive going. A couple plays later, Joe Burrow connects on a pass to Jamar Chase across the middle. The thing that was notable about this play was Jamar Chase got hit in the head by the linebacker for the Texans, Denzel Perryman. A couple days after the game, it came out that Denzel Perryman was going to be suspended for 3 games because of this hit on Jamar Chase. Perryman has had a history of hits to the head on defenseless players, defenseless receivers. He had a fine previously this season for a hit on a player. So he's had repeated violations of this, leading with the crown of the helmet rule. You're not supposed to. They say, they've seen players like Ryan Shazier for the Steelers paralyze himself by leading with the crown of your helmet. So for the safety of the defensive and offensive players, they want to take the helmet to helmet and leading with the helmet out of the game. We saw Stanley Morgan, similar penalty in the game where he was leading with his face. Basically, you don't want to go in and hit people with the top of your head or your helmet or your face. Use your shoulder instead. That's a little bit safer. Not that it's safe to go in full speed and tackle anybody with anything, but if you're going to do it, don't use the top of your head. That was a huge penalty because on top of the yards from the pass, the personal foul penalty took it all the way to the Texans' 14-yard line. Bengals had it 1st and 10 at the Texans' 14. But again, Joe Burrow takes an insane risk for no reason. He's scrambling around. He rolls out to his right. He thinks he sees Tyler Boyd coming open in the end zone and totally loses track of the fact that the cornerback is standing on the sidelines. Cornerback Shaq Griffin just jumps in front of the pass, intercepts it, takes a knee in the end zone for the touchback. Easy interception. Joe Burrow's got to see that. It's like he just got greedy. He only, his target acquisition was only looking for touchdowns and was not looking for guys who could intercept it. And just, he got the tunnel vision. He was blind to the risk. For some reason, Joe Burrow, when he gets in the red zone, he gets a little bit too greedy, looking for those touchdowns. And because we saw in the Raiders playoff game, he's always trying to make a play. Even when he looks like he's almost out of bounds, he threw that ball right before he stepped out to Tyler Boyd for the touchdown. So you can't take that away from Joe Burrow. I know Zach Taylor always wants him to throw the ball away. Don't take any risks. Be hyper conservative. And we remember that play where Joe Burrow was running around, dancing, spinning, threw it to T. Higgins deep along the sidelines and just laughed in Zach Taylor's face. So Zach Taylor can't really say anything about it because that's what makes Joe Burrow great. That's why Joe Burrow won the Heisman Trophy and Zach Taylor didn't even play a snap in the NFL. But at the same time, we need Joe Burrow to be a little bit more intelligent with his decision making, especially when you're down near the goal line. You need points. Can't just give him an easy interception. That's 2 interceptions on back-to-back drives in the fourth quarter by Joe Burrow, and there's 4 minutes left to go in the game. At this point, we see fans of the Bengals leaving their seats, walking out of the aisles, leaving the game. Unbelievable. I don't know what kind of fair weather fans. I get it if you're going to be at home, maybe you're frustrated, you're going to turn the channel off, turn the TV off, go walk around the block, walk the dog, do whatever, take your mind off of this game. But if you're already invested so much that you've gone to the game, you've gone into the stadium, you paid all this money to go there, just stay the extra 4 minutes or whatever. These people said I got to beat the traffic and get out of here. I mean, Cincinnati's not that big that it has so much traffic you're really going to be stuck for that long. It's not like Chicago or something where you're going to be there literally 6 hours after the game. You're going to be fine. Just stay around. What if this game had gone to overtime because it was tied almost near the end of the game? What if these people had left the game and then the game went to overtime? They would have missed an entire quarter of football. So if you're going to the game, don't leave. Don't be that guy who goes and leaves the game. You would have felt like an idiot. Because why? Because the next drive, Texans get it. They Obviously they're trying to run the clock out. They do 2 runs, keep it rolling. Bengals have to use their timeouts. But on 3rd and 2, the Texans try to do a pass over the middle. They try to do another shallow crossing route. This time, Cam Taylor-Britt recognizes the route by Tank Dell, jumps in front of it. And it's kind of a bad route by Tank Dell because he's losing ground. He's fading upfield instead of running horizontally straight across the field. So part of it is bad pass by CJ Stroud, just kind of floating it out there, letting Cam Taylor-Britt jump in front of it. But also kind of a lazy route by Tank Dell, not keeping it flat, letting Cam Taylor-Britt undercut him. But it's a good play by Cam Taylor-Britt to recognize the route, recognize that he needs to undercut this. Maybe if the Texans coaching staff had to do this one over again, they would have called a different play or kind of coached up the players a little bit better how to run this route. But Cam Taylor-Britt, it's a good job of keeping up with a faster receiver in Tank Dell. He's not a slow guy, so good job of trail speed, trail technique, and jumping in front of the route to make a big play at a critical moment when the Bengals needed it the most. It looked like they were out, they were dead, they were done for. Now with this interception, Cam Taylor-Britt almost ran it back for a pick 6. He got it to the 4-yard line before Tank Dell brought him down near the goal line, but it was a big play. A couple plays later, Joe Mixon was able to get it in for a touchdown. That made the score 27-24 Texans, but right when you thought the Bengals were dead, here they come. They've got new life after an interception and a touchdown. Bengals still need to stop by the defense, but they've got timeouts. They've got some time left. They can make it happen. Texans get the ball back, and next drive, the Bengals do their job. They force the Texans into a 3-and-out. They only take a minute off the clock. They get the ball back to the Bengals offense before the 2-minute warning, so there's going to be an extra time out in there the Bengals offense is going to have to work with to drive the ball down the field. So all those people who left the game, if they still hadn't already gotten out of the stadium at that point, I'm sure they were all running back into their seats. At the end of the game, there were still like a few seats empty here and there, but it looked like most of the people had made their way back to the seats. But second play of the drive, Joe Burrow completes a pass to Tyler Boyd over the middle. Tyler Boyd, he's doing a deep crossing route, and he's able to get an angle on the safety where the safety misses the tackle on him. Tyler Boyd has a free path to the end zone, but he doesn't have the speed. The safety for the Texans, number 30, has an angle on him. He's able to knock Tyler Boyd out of bounds at the Texans' 7-yard line, preventing the touchdown. But Bengals pick up a huge 64-yard pickup, so they're in business. They got 1st and goal at the 7. They're only down by 3, so at this point, you're thinking worst case scenario tie, but you don't want to tie. You want to get the touchdown, want to avoid overtime, want to take the lead at this point in the game. There's only 2 minutes left to go. At the very least, we want a field goal. So I'm sure Zach Taylor is telling Joe Burrow, hey, be careful with the football. Don't throw any more insane interceptions down in the red zone. Let's get some points here. We need a field goal, but we definitely want to score a touchdown. Unfortunately, on 1st and goal, Joe Burrow gets sacked by Sheldon Rankins again. Alex Kappa, it's like the same story all day. Straight to the middle, runs right over Alex Kappa, sacks Joe Burrow. And this is kind of a hard hit Joe Burrow takes. He gets just pile driven straight into the ground by Sheldon Rankins. Not going to feel good the next day. The next play, Joe Burrow tries to scramble up the middle. He only gets about 1 yard and then gets whipped onto the ground by Malik Collins. Joe Burrow, he's not a big guy. He only weighs, maybe about 215 pounds. And he's trying to run away from guys who outweigh him by close to 100 pounds. We really need Joe Burrow to not take these type of hits. I know it's the end of the game and he's trying to make plays out there, but these are the type of hits that could put Joe Burrow out for the rest of the season. So win the game, but let's not lose the war while we're trying to win the battle. But this brings up what was the critical play for the Bengals in this game. 3rd and goal from the 13-yard line. They got to have it play. Tyler Boyd is in the right slot. He runs the classic Tyler Boyd slant route. He goes, he sets it up, and does the crossover like he's playing in basketball. There's kind of a hesitation and crosses it over back to the left. Totally fakes out Denzel Perryman, the Texans linebacker. He's got his back to Tyler Boyd. He's so faked out. He gets him totally spun around. Tyler Boyd's breaking across the goal line. Joe Burrow throws a perfect pass, hits Tyler Boyd right in the hands, and he drops it. And then as he's falling to the ground, the ball's coming down, and he's not able to catch it. And he kind of drops it again. He had a second chance, dropped it again. In the critical moment, we needed the touchdown. Tyler Boyd drops it. Second critical drop by Tyler Boyd in this game, and you don't expect that. And after the game, Tyler Boyd declined to speak to the media. I'm sure he was upset with himself. But as Joe Burrow pointed out, Tyler Boyd, right before this, had caught a 64-yard pass. So if it wasn't for Tyler Boyd, Bengals wouldn't have even been in the position to score a touchdown at all. Can't put it all on Tyler Boyd's shoulders. And Tyler Boyd wasn't the one who threw those crazy interceptions right before this. That was the thing that kind of irritated me about the revisionist history that the Bengals have going on in their mic'd up segment they put out on YouTube. They show Tyler Boyd dropping the pass, but they don't show any Joe Burrow interceptions in their video. They're trying to make it seem like Joe Burrow was completely infallible, didn't have any mistakes in this game. A lot of the blame, if we're going to pass around any blame, has to go to Joe Burrow. But of course, we can't do that as Bengals fans. We have to think Joe Burrow is perfect. Just like I'm sure Bills fans think Josh Allen is perfect, even when he throws interceptions right to the Broncos defenders, but that's another story. After the Tyler Boyd drop, Bengals have to settle for the field goal. That makes it a tie game, 27-27, with a minute 33 seconds left to go. For the Bengals, you're looking for the defense to get a stop. Probably not enough time to give the ball back to the offense to score again, but you definitely don't want the Texans to score. You're trying to look basically to force overtime. Unfortunately, 3rd and 6, Texans come out. They complete a pass to Dalton Schultz deep over the middle. It looked like he was guarded by Cam Taylor-Britt man-to-man, but just Cam Taylor-Britt didn't get in to make a play on the ball, and he just kind of like cut Dalton Schultz's legs out from behind him. But that was after he already caught the pass for 25 yards. That got the ball to about midfield for the Texans. 2 plays later, C.J. Stroud completes a pass to Noah Brown, short to the left. It looks like Jermaine Pratt and Nick Scott have him wrapped up, stopped for a short gain, but he breaks out of both of their tackles. It looked like Jermaine Pratt was trying to strip the ball out and cause a fumble, but instead of causing a fumble, he just completely missed the tackle, let Noah Brown get away, ended up getting a 22-yard gain. That put the Texans in perfect position for a field goal with 5 seconds left, which they made. Texans end up winning 30-27 as time expires off the Matt Amendola 38-yard field goal. This brings the records for both teams to 5-4, Texans and Bengals. But with the win, this gives the Texans the edge in the playoff standings with the tiebreaker. Comparing the stats after the game, it wasn't like the Bengals got completely outplayed. I mean, they did get outgained on offense, but the second half was a little bit closer. So total, the Texans had almost 550 yards. They had 544 yards total offense to the Bengals, 380, but still somewhat respectable. And the Bengals actually won the turnover battle 3-2. They forced 2 fumbles and had the interception compared to Joe Burrow's 2 interceptions. So they won that way. But the biggest issue was the rushing. The Texans had 188 yards of rushing to the Bengals' 66. The Texans almost had 3 times as many rushing yards. Now, they did have almost double the carries, but still, so much more rushing yards. They're just able to dominate and control the line of scrimmage against the Bengals. They asked Zach Taylor after the game, what is his opinion or what is his feeling about the fact that the Bengals offense is so pass heavy and they seem to not really focus on the run so much? And he just kind of said like, well, nobody says you have to run it. There's lots of different ways to do it. And if, we're a passing team, that's okay if we can be effective and score points. And yeah, it's true. Like if you win, it doesn't matter if you run, pass, or do whatever. But it's just weird that most coaches would say they want to, establish the run, dominate the line of scrimmage, impose your will on teams, and be able to run the ball and control the ball when you need to. Bengals and Zach Taylor seem content to have the last place rushing offense in the league, and they're okay with that. They're just like, we don't even want to run. Nope, no thank you. Looking at the box scores and comparing the stats, Joe Burrow didn't have his best game, not his worst game. He had 347 yards passing, but he also had those 2 interceptions, which were really costly, and he also got sacked 4 times and gave up 33 yards on those sacks. Not all his fault. Obviously, a lot of that's on the offensive line, but he wasn't able to get rid of the ball when he was under pressure. On the other hand, CJ Stroud had 356 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, but he was only sacked 1 time for no yards lost. So in terms of who played better as a quarterback, I'd have to give the edge to CJ Stroud in this game, honestly. CJ Stroud did commit more turnovers than Joe Burrow, but I don't know if he necessarily had more turnover-worthy plays. Like the fumbles, you can't necessarily put on CJ Stroud, whereas a lot of the throws that Joe Burrow were making were ill-advised and very risky, not what we expect out of Joe Burrow. Also, I was noticing CJ Stroud has really developed a quick release in the pocket, something that he didn't really have to do when he was at Ohio State, because he was able to just sit back there all day and had kind of a slow, more deliberate release. Seems like he's really been working on having just a little flick. He just kind of flicks it out of his hands right before he gets hit and gets just enough oomph on it to get it out to his receivers and complete the pass. But it's interesting to see how CJ Stroud is going to develop as he continues in his professional career. I talked about running. Joe Mixon for the Bengals had 46 yards on 11 carries, 1 touchdown, long of 15. The only other player on the Bengals who even had a carry was Joe Burrow, 20 yards on 5 carries. They didn't even let Travion Williams run the ball once. And as a team, the Bengals only had 16 rushing attempts, and 5 were Joe Burrow. Only 11 carries for Joe Mixon, which is interesting, compared to Devin Singletary, who carried the ball 30 times for the Texans, and he had 150 yards on those 30 carries, average of 5, 1 touchdown, long of 22. It's not like he was busting off long runs. He was just getting like 5 yards, 8 yards, 10 yards a pop, and the Bengals had no answer for it all day. That was definitely unexpected, because coming into the game, Devin Singletary had only had about 200 yards of rushing in the entire season, and he had 150 yards in his one game on the Bengals. Not what we're really wanting to see out of the Bengals rushing defense, but unfortunately, that's kind of been their MO this season. They've been known to give up a lot of rushing yards to running backs. For receivers, the Texans' Noah Brown was definitely the leading receiver in the game. He had 7 catches for 172 yards on 8 targets, only a long of 34. A lot of his catches were in that intermediate range, 25 yards or so, where he was just finding a soft spot in the Bengals zone, and CJ Stroud was finding him, hitting him on perfect timing. Bengals had no answer for that. He was just constantly getting open. Dalton Schultz, the tight end, had 71 yards. Tank Dell had 6 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown, but he had 14 targets. So 6 catches for 56 on 14 targets. Not a very efficient day. Overall, you'd say the Bengals did a pretty good job of holding Tank Dell under control, but definitely not on Noah Brown. And that was surprising to see, because Nico Collins was probably the number 1 receiver for the Texans. He was out this entire game. For the Bengals, even though it seemed like Jamar Chase was a decoy and limited in the way they were using him for most of this game, he ended up being their top receiver. 5 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets with a long of 64. Tyler Boyd had 8 catches for 117, no touchdowns, long of 64 on 12 targets. Tyler Boyd ended up being the primary receiver with T. Higgins out. Tanner Hudson had 6 catches for 33 yards on 7 targets. And Trenton Irwin, 2 catches, 54 yards, including that 32-yard touchdown. Not much else to speak of. 1 catch for 6 yards from Irv Smith, 1 catch for 2 yards from Travion. Mitch Wilcox had no catches. He almost got split in half trying to catch a pass from Joe Burrow one time. Not bad offensive production, but just not enough to win the game against the Texans. Defensively for the Bengals, Cam Taylor-Britt was the leading tackler with 9 total, including 7 solo. He did have 2 pass breakups and the interception that he almost ran back for a pick 6. But he was responsible for a lot of those passes down the field to Noah Brown and some of the other receivers. And Cam Taylor-Britt was not making plays in the running game. There was a lot of plays where Devin Singletary had Cam Taylor-Britt just lined up and juked right past him. Cam Taylor-Britt didn't even get a hand on him. So Cam Taylor-Britt has had an interception in 4 out of the last 5 games. Making plays in terms of making plays on the ball, picking the ball off when it's thrown in his direction, which is good. But we need to see more in the run game support from Cam Taylor-Britt and making more of a play on the ball, not letting guys catch it in front of him. That's part of the reason why he's making so many tackles, is because they're throwing it at him and they're completing the pass right in front of him. Then he's making the tackle. Surprisingly, after that, Jermaine Pratt and Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie were the next leading tacklers with 9, 8, and 8. Dax Hill had 7, Cam Sample 5, Logan Wilson 5. Trey Hendrickson had 4 tackles. But if you look through the list of the box score, not a lot of QB hits, only 4 QB hits. No player had more than 1, and only 1 tackle for loss in the entire game for Jermaine Pratt. The Bengals defense was not able to force a lot of negative plays on the Texans. If you look through the list of plays, Texans had positive plays almost every play, and that's why they were able to keep drives going. That's what Zach Taylor was talking about, getting momentum. Momentum means having positive yardage, positive plays every single play, and not getting penalties, sacks, losing yardage, things that the Bengals were doing to shoot themselves in the foot, especially early in this game. For the Texans, the biggest story was obviously Sheldon Rankins. He had 3 sacks in this game alone and 4 quarterback hits by himself. Texans ended up recording 9 quarterback hits on Joe Burrow, 4 sacks total. Not a very good performance by the Bengals offensive line. Joe Burrow, you don't want him taking hits like that. And it's not like it's going to get any easier. All the teams the Bengals are going to have to face from here on out are going to have defensive lines that are going to be as good, if not better. Speaking of which, the Bengals are going to have another tough opponent up next on Thursday night. They're going to have to go to Baltimore to play the Baltimore Ravens, who have already beaten them at home on Paycor Stadium. It's another tough test. It's an important matchup because the Ravens are currently leading the AFC North. I wanted to break down this Week 10 matchup against the Texans and talk about why the Bengals lost this game. And even though it is looking bad, it's not the end of the season. That's the one thing to keep in mind, is they can't, keep losing games, but it's not over yet. Can't jump off the ledge and be like fans in Buffalo. They just fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, because they lost, their 5th game of the season. I understand it's rough, but if the Bengals lose, a game next week, they're not going to be firing any of the coordinators. If the Bengals give up, another 550 yards on defense, let's not have anybody talk about firing Coach Lou. Lou Anarumo is not going anywhere just because they lose a couple games. Now, it's looking like Trey Hendrickson may not be able to go on Thursday night. He hyperextended his knee right at the end of this game. It was a weird play where Noah Brown was stumbling as he was getting up at the very last play of the game, right before they kicked the field goal. He stumbled and fell right into Trey Hendrickson's knee. He went down, clutching his knee. It looked like it was going to be a catastrophic injury, but they said Trey Hendrickson got the MRI. Doesn't look like it's going to be any significant damage. Hopefully just a hyperextended knee, so he shouldn't miss too much time. But with the short week, it's going to be touch and go whether or not he's able to go. Of course, Zach Taylor's being very tight-lipped. Everybody's day-to-day, forever, So we won't know probably right up until game time whether Trey Hendrickson plays. But that's going to be a very critical thing. If Hubbard and Hendrickson are both out, the Bengals are really going to have some trouble trying to contain Lamar Jackson and the Ravens on Thursday night. But we'll get into that next episode. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications, give me a rating, all that type of stuff. I'll be back next time when we talk about the Ravens game. But until then, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.